Hi there dudes. So talk about burnout syndrome, as it's been coined on the DML forums, is something that I have been seeing an absolute ton of lately on pretty much every form of social media that people actually talk about DML on. People voiced their very real concerns that this prompted a response from Andrus on the forums on behalf of the game's dev team, which I will go through and give my own response. I mean, I've been playing DML now for 4.5 years, since January 15th, 2015. I've experienced pretty much every single event ever released in the game, bar about 10 from being too busy to log in. My opinions do not speak for everyone, I speak only for myself, but I do interact with many different members of the DML community every single day, and I see what many of them are saying. First of all, I do want to thank Andrus and the devs for giving a response. Many of them have a lot more responsibilities than you probably think they do, and it's very easy to say, oh, you know, they don't care, they don't read what we say, but it's simply not true. Don't get me wrong, DML has always had a lot of problems, and that's sort of the point of me making this, but the moment that we resort to insults or going, well, it's not like I should bother since they don't, well, that doesn't really get anybody anywhere, does it? So let's go through the post I'm talking about. This was posted about 2 days ago now. Coming back from the dev team, we'd like to share our thoughts about this topic, talking about burnout syndrome. Indeed, DML is a game that aims for exciting features and an interesting event schedule that arouses the interests of all kinds of players. We strive to meet the expectations and needs of many types of users. Fans of the breeding game are looking for more complex breeding tests and collections. Those who love to lead their dragon teams to fight want to be challenged by difficult opponents and situations. Those who search for strategical challenges enjoy events where coming up with a plan early on is key to success. Veterans cheer to collecting new dragons, while newcomers prefer to get a chance for earning dragons from the past. Our goal is to help every player to find what he or she is really interested in, and to reach this, it is inevitable to run multiple events at the same time. So that is what they said. But something in particular they spoke about here is having complex breeding tests and collections, having difficult opponents and situations, events where coming up with a plan early is key to success, and collecting new dragons. They believe that to make everyone as happy as possible, it is inevitable to run multiple events at the same time. After thinking about the response that they gave, my first thought really was, hang on, which events in game actually do any of those things? Complex breeding tests and collections? Is that supposed to be what chain breeding events are? Chain breeding events in their current state are uninteresting, add no additional complexity, and pretty much come down to you must finish the other event in an inhuman amount of time to have a solid chance of breeding the chain breeding event dragon. Like, think about it. Currently, we have the Funny Feathers and Brain Freeze chain breeding events going on. They both last 10 days. The absolute minimum amount of time it takes to complete Funny Feathers is 6 days, 7 hours, and 2 minutes, assuming that you are absolutely perfect with the reset timings. But then we have to factor in the fact that the average person is supposed to sleep at least approximately 7 hours a day. This is much higher for children and younger folks. But to be kind to Gameloft, let's put it at 6 hours of sleep every single day for the event period. So that's 9 days worth of 6 hours sleep, which is 54 hours. So that's 8.5 days absolute minimum it should take for a person to finish the event, getting the bare minimum of sleep, and an unhealthy amount as a child. So this leaves us with a day and a half of leeway. It's nothing new, it's pretty standard for DML events to have these timings, but people do have lives, and 99.9% of players are not going to be logging in perfectly for every single reset for the entire duration of a 10-day long event. If we then think about the Brain Freeze chain breeding event, we've only got a day and a half to do it, but we still need to hatch the tier 10 dragon to even have a chance at breeding the Ice Cream. So then the Hornbill takes 23 hours and 30 minutes to hatch base. This means that in actuality, you have a grand total of half a day to actually try and breed the chain breeding event dragon, assuming you don't gem through tiers and you don't gem through the hatching. These events on their own require somebody to be focused on the game constantly for an entire 10-day period. They were made to be events that could run alone as their own standalone event and keep players constantly logging in for as much as possible. These events were not completed by a grand majority of the player base ever, but recently we have had one event, followed by another event, followed by another event, followed by another event. There is a huge difference between players wanting to log in to play a video game versus players feeling forced to log in for the sake of progression. I mean, take the Divine events for example. If you're not logging in and completing every single event during the Divine event period, you miss out on the strongest dragons in the game. If you don't log in for this 1 month in particular, regardless of circumstances, you are put at a severe disadvantage compared to people that were free for that month. So rather than players logging into the game to play the event because the events are fun, they log into the game non-stop because if they don't, they're put at a severe disadvantage. A lot of burnout comes from players being stuck doing things in game that they don't want to be doing. You could say, well, it's their choice to log in and play the events, they only have themselves to blame. Okay. So it means that if you don't have internet access for 2 days of the castle event during the Divine event period, it becomes near impossible for you to get the castle event major reward dragon, which means, without factoring in anything about the Divine chest dragons, it is near impossible to get the final reward dragon. For being busy for 2 days out of an entire month, your entire efforts are for nothing. And I think really this is the heart of the problem. The events on their own are far too demanding for a grand majority of players to finish even on their own. But recently, we've had solo events, chain breeding events, bottomless dungeon, new clan events, and that's not even taking into account any of the regular game, being things like breeding, regular dragons, enchantment league, arena, map battles, weekend events, dragons of the week or month, and pretty much every single one of those things do the exact same thing 6 times a day, every single day. Again, the solo events with 4 or 5 new events running simultaneously. The events need to be made so that they can be completed much faster to compensate. Otherwise, you're expecting players to finish what used to be one tedious event on its own, to instead do 3 or 4 of them simultaneously. This means that players, depending on the event, are sometimes expected to be logging in every 30 minutes to an hour, all the time. If you don't, then you miss out on either an extremely important and powerful Divine Dragon, or you don't get the major reward dragons from events, which are now sometimes a requirement to participate in the second phase event, like chain breeding or Heroes Challenge events. I think having 2-part events are good in concept, but again, the events are far too demanding and people don't want to log in, they have to log in. In many other popular games that have seasonal or extra tasks that you can do for bonus rewards, I'll use League of Legends for example, the tasks that they give to the players to complete for special bonuses can usually be done within a couple of days if you're playing non-stop, even if the event period lasts for a week or 2. Sure, DML and League of Legends are very different games fundamentally, but the main point is, players that want to complete these special, air quotes, tasks for bonus rewards want to do these tasks and are forced to give up 8 days of constant gameplay out of 10 to get the limited time rewards. I mean, everyone has their own schedule. Some people might only have an hour a day free. Some people might have the ability to log into DML every 20 minutes, no matter what time of day it is. But a majority of people that will play DML play it to wind down after all of their other life commitments. Players that want to play but don't have ridiculous amounts of spare time should have events that they're capable of finishing, rather than them being given the response, well, just aim for the tier 3 milestone, which is normally a regular breedable dragon, which is not comparable to the tier 10 rewards in any way. But then there still needs to be enough things happening in the game to make it interesting for veteran, or air quotes, no-life players. The bottomless dungeon, or endless dungeon, seemed like an answer to this in concept, but unfortunately, rather than taking this opportunity to make an event that was truly endless, and something that the players could play at any time unlike anything else in the game, it was made incredibly expensive and pay to play. I know that Andres has already said that the developers do believe that the bottomless dungeon needs to be tweaked and changes are due to come soon, but aside from the absurd pricing on the final chest in the event, bugs and, other problems, the event is not bottomless or endless for 99% of the player base, even if they get to the max bonus attack and health multipliers. At the start of a dungeon week, some players can only get 10 kills before their dragons are dead, and then they have to wait 6 hours before they can do anything. Players that have 3 level 100 8-star dragons seem to get about 30 kills on average before they get taken out, with a few of the bonuses active, but then again, they lose, they get to open one chest, sometimes less, and then they have to wait another 6 hours to do anything. The bottomless dungeon, or endless dungeon as it was named at one point, ended up playing similarly to a castle event instead. Why can't we have some sort of event that isn't reliant on 6-hour wait timers? Why can we not just have one part of many parts of the game that is truly, air quotes, endless? We spend gems on every single thing in the game. Yes, the game needs to make money, but why can't we have just one little part of it not to be based on a pay-to-win or pay-to-play structure? If you want to give all players something to do while still giving newer players something to do, then that is the most obvious step to take. There are so many times where I've just wanted to sit down and play DML for a free 6 hours that I have. But guess what? The endless timer structure in the game means I get to play for about 1 hour if I do absolutely everything in the game. But then there's literally nothing left to do unless I wait 2 hours to do some map battles. Players that want to play your game for a prolonged period of time can't. Players that want to finish off your event sometimes can't due to their extortionate requirements. Like, come on, if you want to breed the Dragon of the Month and you succeed during a majority of regular events, it holds you back in the event for 2 days. So to enjoy certain parts of the game, you also take away from other parts of the game. That isn't fun, it's stressful, especially considering the Zodiac Dragons are a year-long event. In essence, and if you fail to get one of them, that's it. The end goal is out of reach. So you're literally forcing players to put all of their event progress on hold because they need to breed one dragon in the entire month. If the events had 4 or 5 days of leeway to compensate for regular breeding, Dragon of the Month breeding, and so forth, they would be a hell of a lot less stressful, and plus then you could run multiple events without them overlapping and ruining your chances at doing other parts of the game. You bred the Dragon of the Month? That's okay, you still have an extra 2 days to still do the event after it's done in your breeding den. You won't have access to your desktop PC for 6 hours a day since you have a job? No worries, the event timers still allow you to finish without having to stay awake in the middle of the night to complete them. But we all know the reason the event timers are so demanding is because it forces people to use gems to complete it if they have things to do. There is no other reason why the event structure would be so incredibly harsh otherwise. Again, in plenty of other games out there, they have seasonal events that last a couple of weeks and they only take a few days at most to complete them fully if you're logging in for a few hours a day. That is not the case with DML, and that is why players are so, air quotes, burnt out. Even if the game saw more player retention now per player than it did with singular events every 2 weeks, can you imagine just how many people left or never wanted to play the game to begin with after seeing the ridiculous requirements to achieve anything? This isn't even factoring in the blatant fact that the longer you've been playing, the more of an advantage you have over newer players. You've got so close to creating an event that all players could enjoy and keep them engaged in the game for hours on end with the bottomless dungeon. But it was all for nothing the moment you threw in long waiting timers and a prerequisite for a player to have max level exception divines for it to be truly endless and beat the level 130 dragons that appear. When you get to the level 130 dragon stage, the battles are super tedious and boring since the enemies take like 2 rounds of Dragon Fury to kill, all for what reward? Oh, 500 tokens. Looks like you'll have to do that another 4 times before you can open the final chest a single time. It's very true what other people have been saying. The players and Gameloft have very different expectations for what events should do. Players want the events to be fun, engaging, and reward them for playing with cool looking dragons. The developers want the players to stay engaged, but this engagement shouldn't come at the expense of taking away the microtransactional aspects of the game. Remember the good old calendar events that used to reward players for being loyal and logging into the game? Yeah, we haven't seen one of those in a very long time. All that you needed to do was log in for most days of the month or week, and if you logged in for 95% of the days, you got a cool dragon at the end. This meant that even players that were very busy during those times were still able to get something for being a player and didn't have to be logging in every single hour. Where did those go? Why did they disappear? Almost every single person I've ever spoken to about calendar events has said, oh yeah, they were cool, super easy, but we got a cool thing from it. Players just don't feel rewarded for the amount of inhumane effort some of them put into the game. I know so many children that wake up in the middle of the night setting timers to finish off events. They'll go and steal their phone from their parents' bedroom at 3 in the morning because otherwise they can't finish off the events. Sure, it's the kids' choice, and kids are sometimes a bit silly, but if they don't log in at those times every night of some events, it is impossible for them to finish it. This isn't a rare occurrence. I also sometimes stay up until 2, 3 in the morning primarily to play some of these god-awfully boring events, because otherwise I will not finish it in time. I have been playing for 4.5 years. I have pretty much everything in game at my disposal to use since I have 3 fully maxed dragons, but it still takes me waking up in the middle of the night for a good portion of events to complete them in time, assuming I have literally anything else to do in my day. Then you wonder why your player base keeps saying that they're tired, why they're burnt out. It's not about Gameloft providing players with fun events for all different kinds of players or not. It's about the fact that every single event you give players is given with the pretense that you want them to spend money to finish them if they're a normal player. So I guess the TLDR, or I guess the TLDL, too long didn't listen for all this, is that your events are too demanding to give us so many at once. If you want to give us stacking events, they need to be doable in a shorter time frame. Otherwise, players are going to stop bothering to participate. When players stop wanting to participate in all of the events that you set up, that's when they start leaving permanently. If we were provided with an event that we could truly play at any time without being relying on timers, this would give something to even those that finish every single regular event. I don't blame people for feeling burnt out. They should be burnt out considering the insane requirements to finish event after event after event. Let your players feel rewarded. They shouldn't have to give up everything else in life every single week for the sake of 1 or 2 epic dragons. That is just the tip of the iceberg for my opinions of the event, but I feel if I went any further, a lot of it would be repeated issues that I've been complaining about since the game's inception. The events in DML are not impossible for free-to-play players, but they are getting close to near impossible, and that should not be the case for every single event we're given week after week after week. But I really appreciate you listening to this for so long. I don't necessarily expect what I say to do or achieve anything. I just wanted to weigh in on the subject like many others have been recently. These are my own opinions, and while I will probably still continue to play the game, I'm finding less motivation to finish events as they're coming along. That's all.